November 2023 marked the PS5's 3-year anniversary, which historically would mean we're halfway through this generation, which seems insane to me. Like, just saying that out loud, that we're possibly another 3 years away only from the PlayStation 6, that seems way too soon. Especially if we're getting a Pro next year, maybe the cycle will actually be a 7-year gen cycle as opposed to 6. But in any case, here we are. Supposedly halfway through the gen, and with the PS5 still seeming very new. When the PS4 closed off the 8th generation of gaming consoles, Sony really was on a high, possibly the closest they've been since the end of the PS2 generation. Could they hold that momentum, or would they get too cocky like with the early PS3 gen? Well, 3 years on, I'm happy to report that it's mostly gone well.
Mostly.
On this video, we're going to be reviewing 5 aspects of the PlayStation 5, which will be chaptered below. So feel free to skip ahead to a part you are more interested in, as this video is going to be a long one. It's going to be long. We'll start with the hardware and appearance, including peripherals. Secondly will be the software and UI. Thirdly will be the PS Plus subscription service. Fourth will be business practices and communication. And fifth and finally, the games. I will try to go into detail into each area as much as possible, but some stuff will be skimmed in order to keep the video's total time down. So grab your beanbag, hold on tight, it's going to be a long one. So first off is the appearance. When the PS5 was announced, it was received with mixed reactions and memed on hard due to its physical similarity with a router. We've had the George Foreman grill with the PlayStation 3, now we have the router with the PlayStation 5. Some people really liked the way it looked, such as MKHBD and Mystic Ryan. Others less so, like at the IGN GameScoop podcast, and a whole bunch of people on Twitter. So overall, it was a very divisive design choice, unlike the PS4, which came before it, which was mostly universally liked and was a much safer design choice. This one is very unique and really stands out. They've gone for that avant-garde style this time around, which is fair enough. Like, that's what they were going for and it worked. It does stand out in the entertainment center, just like with the PS3. It's definitely a console that looks considerably better from the side profile rather than straight on. Straight on, it's just full-on router vibes. At a straight angle, it kind of looks like the future, whatever that means. Whilst I was not initially impressed personally with its appearance, I was hoping it would grow on me a lot like how the PS3 did, and I'm happy to report again it has grown on me quite a lot over the past 3 years, and now I do actually think it is quite a good looking console. So it's happened again. I don't know if anyone else gets this. I had it with the PS2 also, thought that looked crazy when they showed it off in pictures. Now I'm literally trying to make my PS5 look more like a PS2. Hashtag bring back that font. Seriously, that font is sexy. It's still pretty freaking large though. Like, if this console looked exactly the same but 2/3 of the size smaller, I'd be quite happy. Segue. And the real sign that we're actually halfway through the generation is the release of a slim version, which actually is almost 2/3 of the size. A lot of people online are questioning whether it qualifies as a slim, but the difference in size is actually on par with the difference last generation. With the PS4 Slim being around 30% smaller than the original PS4, and hey, guess what? The PS3 Slim also had a similar ratio of losing around 30% of its volume. I think that time it was 33, but still within the same ballpark. Here's an article from Digital Trends that shows the PS4 to Slim was 30%, PS3 was 33% smaller, and if we look at the PS2, okay, that one was insane. That was 75% reduction in size. I still don't understand what happened there. God, I love that console so much. Also, good case in point for maybe bringing back the power brick. Just saying, you know, if it means a 75% reduction in size, the PS5 could really benefit from that. In any case, I digress. The last two consoles from PlayStation both had a similar reduction size of 30%, just like the PS5. So what's going on with all the negative press? Why does IGN keep saying it's not a slim console when, you know, it actually is, and why is there so much hate in general? I think here what really is happening is that the original PS5 is considerably larger than any other console before it, including outside of the PlayStation bubble. And so therefore you probably will notice it less. And a lot of people probably want the excess loss to be even more significant than just 30%. There was a big scandal over the stand also. Gotta get them views, but hey, again, guess what? Except from the original PS5, no PlayStation console ever, regular or slim, has ever come bundled with a stand. And look how badly the PS2 Slim needed it. I'm also pretty sure the stand for that was around the same price as this new one for the PS5. So there's that as well. And guess what? Wipe away those tears, because the PS5 Slim actually stands vertically quite well on its own. In fact, better than the original PS5, which might be the reason why Sony was fairly okay with not bundling in the stand this time around. Historically, the Slim version would potentially be something I personally move on to. I think this time I might actually wait to see what the Pro looks like. Even though I like the look of the PS5, I kind of do want a more radically different design. Also, I have seen how good Alan Wake 2 can look on a high-end PC, and it's the first time really this generation where you can start to see the gap starting to widen between high-end gaming PC graphics compared to current generation consoles. The ray tracing with 60 FPS on that game, boy, that would be nice. We do have these recent teardown videos of the Slim on YouTube, and depending on who you like to watch, you all get varying reactions. Dave 2D more so on the disappointed side, and Linus on the positive side. I personally quite liked Kevin Kenson's review, so be sure to check that out. I am also happy they brought back the classy line in the middle, a design choice that was around with both the PS2 Slim and the original PS4. As well as that, the original PS4 also had the glossy top part, much like this new version. It kind of makes you realize how the OG PS5 just looks very bare with nothing in the middle, which is something I've kind of had an issue with since the beginning, and I've tried to remedy it myself using the various decal stickers you find on Etsy or Redbubble. I will get back to this point in a sec when we talk about faceplates. Again, I think the PS5 and the PS5 Slim look good. I just really kind of want to see as well what the Slim will look like with other faceplates, which will come later, as has been confirmed by Sony. And that segues me to my next point, the faceplates. Now, having the option to replace the faceplates is an awesome one on paper. Like, you look at all the amazing designs the original PS4 and Slim came in, and there were many options to choose from, although obviously not interchangeable. Shout out to see-through cases or plates, see-through everything. We need a see-through Switch already, please. That would be just great. You know, I've still got my see-through Game Boy Color, and that thing is beautiful, as well as my see-through DualShock. So my initial concern when these were announced, well, when the PS5 was announced with its faceplate system, was that they wouldn't actually release many faceplates of varying colors or patterns. And 3 years on, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have a fairly large number of solid colors of varying different colors as well, which is nice. But in terms of actual designs or different looks, it's been very underwhelming. If we compare it to something similar, for instance, such as the Xbox 360 removable faceplates, there were a sufficient number of official and third-party releases. I personally had a really cool Transformers faceplate, which converted the power button light into the Transformers logo, which was very cool. The faceplates on 360, I mean, there's so much to like about that console. But yeah, they did a good job. And that's kind of what I was hoping for this. We ain't there yet. Creative designs like this were really cool. We had plenty of options to choose from. And so with the PS5, we only really have a handful of different designs to choose from. Like on the official site right now, there's only a grey camouflage one along with the solid colours. We have had the somewhat controversial Spider-Man 2 faceplates recently, and before that the utterly bizarre LeBron James ones also. I'm guessing the reason for that was because NBA 2K is one of the biggest games on the PS5. So that explains that. And that's it. It's been 3 years. Again, solid colours are great. Especially the silver one looks really cool, and the new blue one, part of the Earth theme that you got going on, that looks sick as well. But where are the designs? Like, why can't we have some retro ones? You know, maybe just the PS symbols, like the Days of Play PS4 we had. Or what if, you know, we try to do it with the PS2 font? You know, I don't know if I've mentioned the PS2 already, but man, I love that font. You know, you flip the 2 around, it makes a 5. It's so simple. Yeah, we need to bring that back. Just anything really to fill this huge empty space. I mean, I get it. It's a ton better than the shit flappy Starfield skin for the Xbox Series X. But still, it's a massive avenue for selling accessories. Solid colors, great. You got them covered, pun intended. But now let's get some design choices out there. Some more game-based ones would be good. Like if you go on Etsy right now for some inspiration, there's loads on there. We even have this God of War Ragnarok one, which is a bit out there, granted, but like it's cool, right? Like it's different. You know, that's what makes it cool. And so 2024 will actually mark the 30-year anniversary for PlayStation, which makes me feel incredibly old, but that would be a great time for some retro nostalgia faceplates. Please do not make them limited edition. I know they are, right? Like they're gonna, just like with the original PS4 25th anniversary console, which was beautiful. But what happens with that is that it gets scalped to Kingdom Come. Yeah, I'm going to try and get them first. Hopefully, you know, keep your fingers crossed for me. Also, as we're speaking about faceplates, I'd like to give a general PSA. If you buy any of these open fan faceplates, such as the D brand ones, please be aware that whilst you are technically getting less restrictive airflow into your console, you will also be getting a lot more dust and anything else externally that's present in your air, such as, you know, if you're a vapor or smoker or maybe even pet hairs, all of that shit is going to have direct access to the inside of your console. And you know, the reason Sony didn't design it that way in the first place is so that it keeps the inside of your console clean. If you've ever opened up a PS4, especially Slim or Pro, you'll know why. Like, there's a reason those things sound like a jet engine, and that's because they were basically Roombas. Look at the size of this dust bunny. That's a real dust bunny inside my own personal PS4 Slim when I opened it after a few years of use. Don't judge me. But yeah, that's why the fan gets so loud, because those things will suck up a lot of dust. So Sony obviously noted this going into the design of the PS5. And that's why we have the faceplate system. They serve as a filter to trap dust from the air coming in before going inside the closed system beyond the faceplates, which would then mean, you know, if you do have the open faceplate, you'd have to actually open up the shell in order to clean it. And that's literally why they have these dust ports on the sides. With the open faceplate design, you completely bypass these. Why am I the only person saying this? I don't work in tech. None of these motherfuckers are saying anything. Like, I get it, Linus and others never mention this. You know, they got brand deals, etc. And for the record, I really like Linus Tech Tips, by the way. Fair enough, but it's pretty clear someone who's opened up consoles before to clean them. You know, this is why Sony have this system. I don't see them doing an open faceplate design anytime soon. Speaking of fans, 3 years later, I am happy to report that there's still no fan noise. The real Achilles heel of the beautiful PS4 Slim and Pro hardware were its jet engine fans, which, depending on your setup, could serve as a real distraction. Here you can literally rest your head right up to it and hear nothing. The disc read noise, on the other hand, can be pretty distracting when it does kick up. Early reports suggest that the disc spinning sound on the Slim is actually more noticeable, which sucks, to be honest. For me personally, that might be enough of a reason to put me off getting one. I am quite sensitive to external sounds. If we look back at the launch of the PS5, one of the earliest patches for the system was in fact to reduce the disc spinning up so randomly. Push Square referenced it as hourly, which I can sort of corroborate. At least with my PS5, the disc spin still comes on, maybe not hourly, but regularly, even when I'm starting up Netflix, which is a bit silly. You don't need to check the disc when I'm starting up Netflix. It's become something you sort of have to just live with, which is a real shame considering all the work done to reduce the sound of the fan. I guess it's another reason to welcome the all-digital future, and maybe that's why it's an oversight. I don't really know, because they've really tried hard to make sure the fan is so quiet. But you know, the more you look at the design of the PS5, especially with the Slim, it kind of feels like Sony really want to phase out the disc drive. I have to say though, kudos to them for making the disc version the main production unit. Again, with the Slim, it seems to be the same case. I'm happy they realized that even despite the growing proportions of digital sales, which as of recent makes a whopping 70 to 80% of their sales, which is insane. That gives them enough of a reason to push for that. So I'm very grateful for them not doing that. The obvious remedy to all of this, of course, is just to remove the disc in between games, or if you're watching Netflix like me, and that will resolve the issue. I remember when it launched, Metal Jesus did a review of the console and made quite a point to mention the fan noise. I'm still fairly certain he was actually talking about the disc spin sound. I've heard other people make the same mistake, because it does kind of sound like a fan starting up, and again, the fan sounds dead. It's great. As someone that has a gaming laptop and a PS4 Slim, that aspect is still massively appreciated. Now, onto the real star of the show, the DualSense controller. It's still one of the best gaming controllers out there, and that isn't just my opinion, it's the general consensus. I will say all of these amazingly exaggerated features that were shown off during the bundled Astrobot game were kind of forgotten about. Like, that's still the best example of the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers still to this day. When it launched, I thought that might be the case, seeing as when you look at any hardware features or gimmicks, back touch on the Vita, the touch panel, or 6-axis controller, it's always the first-party Sony games that really utilize these features. And that makes sense to a degree. It's just a shame that it isn't utilized more. Like, multi-platform games have less incentive to do something like that. It involves time and resources, which I totally get. Nonetheless, it's still a phenomenal controller, and I am enjoying the continued use of the controller speaker and microphone. I love the first introduction of the controller speaker in the Wiimote, and I'm glad it's something that's continued beyond that, that being a feature that's actually commonly utilized by third parties. And I've always found it really immersive, to be honest with you. Shout out to No More Heroes on the Wii, turning your Wiimote into a phone. Phenomenal. For me, at least, I thought it was a cool gimmick. Also, the introduction of the microphone directly embedded into the controller is something I also really like. During its initial launch, there were many reports of issues in the sense of it being too sensitive picking up your button presses as you're playing. That has reportedly been patched out. I've never come across this issue myself, so it's hard for me to talk on it. I will say it is great to just be able to jump into a multiplayer game without having to look around for a microphone to plug in, and for the most part, from what I've heard, it sounds great. Going back to Astrobot, how cool would it be if each time we got a different revision of the PS5, there was a free sequel or DLC to Astrobot? Still one of the best exclusives ever, in my opinion, and I love Sony so much for making it a free bundled game. I hope that's a tradition they stick to for every console henceforth, if not the revision consoles. Also, I should note there are reports of stick drift carrying on to this generation still. I personally have not experienced any issues with the controllers I have had, and this is an issue that involves analog stick technology in general and has affected all platforms. One thing I would like to suggest with the touchpad, and I'm sort of leaning into the UI portion of this review, is that we've seen accessibility be a big thing over the past few years, and Sony in particular have been very good at spearheading this. You look at The Last of Us Part 2 and the Access controller being examples of why. We've got this button assignment here on the dashboard where you can mix button assignments, not too dissimilar from how Nintendo do it with the Switch. This is great. Would be cool if we had custom profiles like the Switch do, but at the moment that seems to be a feature locked to just the Edge controller. What I'm wondering is, why don't we turn the touchpad, which essentially at this time is kind of a dead piece of the controller, into a fully customizable touch and press button, not just for accessibility reasons, but for general gameplay. Similar to such use cases such as in Ragnarok, where we have the left side pushed down to access the armor menu right for the map, or in Horizon where you swipe up to see the HUD, or even with PS1 and 3 emulation where one side is select, the other side is start. Those are nice, very simple implementations of using the touch panel. What if we could assign all manners of multiple actions and assignments, whether it's touch or press, paired out with custom profiles assigned to various games so it loads up when the game is booted up? Fucking boom. You do that and you have really opened up the doors for accessibility and custom controller assignments, which currently is mostly locked behind having to purchase the PS Edge controller, terrible name by the way, and the touchpad is no longer dead. You know, sometimes, not always, but sometimes Sony will release something and just hope that other people will utilize it. Looking at you, VR2, and RIP the Vita. Speaking of peripherals, I think it's time to move on to the wealth of accessories released for this console since launch, where Sony really have been pushing out a ton of hardware non-stop, capitalizing on the success of PS5 sales, now at around 46 million, which is reasonable considering the time span. I will be skimming through these, otherwise I will literally be here all day and my camera will run out of battery and my voice will stop working. So if we rewind back to the DualSense Edge, again, terrible name. Initially, the Pro Controller received some negative press due to its price tag and short battery life, but that did not stop it selling well, with it recently being the best-selling game and accessory of March 2023. So clearly, it has a market out there. £200 though is a lot, and there's other Pro Controllers out there with more versatility for a cheaper price tag. But what they're really trying to sell you here is the DualSense functionality with Pro Controller features, which honestly I think is kind of a weird mix. I don't think Pro Controllers really need that, but that's what they're going for. So I guess if you enjoy the DualSense tech and want the customizability of a Pro Controller, then this will be for you. One thing I will endorse though is removable chargeable batteries, especially for Pro Controllers. I get that the cable is cool because it locks in and it's longer this time around, but still I think it's a must for any Pro Controller. We've also got a bounty of headsets, more recently the Pulse Explore and the Pulse Elite. I do actually really like the look of all of these, especially the Pulse Explore. There is some controversy again though with how they connect to the PS Portal, which we'll talk about in a sec. After Sony's recent acquisition of all these, they have developed a proprietary connection which is low latency, which makes sense considering the importance of such a feature with a streaming device. Low latency is a top priority. But, big but, it would be nice if Bluetooth headsets in general were an option for the PS5 as well as the Portal. When Nintendo patched it into their system 4 to 5 years after release, it gave me hope, but still nothing on either the PS4 or the PS5, and here again in the Portal. And more evident, it seems that Sony is possibly doubling down on having a proprietary alternative. I hate proprietary technology, it sucks. I'm glad this is the only case of it so far on the PlayStation 5, but I hope it's not a slippery slope we're going down here. Now, onto the PS Portal. As of time of writing, reviews are still coming out, and the press is actually fairly positive, much to everyone's surprise, and so are the sales, with pre-orders selling out pretty fast, so it'll be interesting to see and hear more about sales as time goes by. There were some mixed reactions at first, not offering streaming games through the PS Plus service, as well as only specifically being able to be used tied to a PS5. However, this has recently been updated, saying that it is a possibility and something they're looking into. And it would completely make sense, it's a no-brainer considering the newly launched PS5 streaming service within PS Plus. Honestly, the more I see of this thing, the more I kind of want it. Like, I think it's perfect for bedroom gaming. For those complaining they want a PSP2 or a PS4 portable, like, I get it. You know, the Steam Deck has been fairly successful for what it is, but it still ain't on Switch levels, and I don't think it ever will be. And we've gone down this road before, man, like twice. And, you know, the first time the PSP sold 80 million units, which is great, but the second time, Vita only sold around 14 million, 13. That's a big drop off. I don't know if we should go down that rabbit hole again. We also have the Access controller, which is great to see. This thing was made in collaboration with charities such as Special Effect, and it's interesting to see how many gamers are interested in using this for non-conventional use, such as with fighting games. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the PSVR 2. Technically, not an accessory, but it might as well be at this point. Burn! I do actually have an entire video going over my thoughts on this that sum it up fairly concisely. Despite looking gorgeous and receiving positive reviews from the tech space, there just aren't many games for it as it stands. It's silly expensive, still silly expensive after almost a year of release, and it should 100% be PC compatible. As of time of writing, there are rumors that this might be a possibility, but they're just rumors at this point. We also have some accessories that came at launch, but we'll avoid these as this is more of a post-launch review. One thing I will say though is avoid the HD camera. Literally a load of garbage. The only thing this is good for is that it looks like a PS5. it has that PS5 aesthetic, which a lot of the accessories do, which is great. I love that look, but that is literally it. Now onto external storage. This is something Sony has rolled out support throughout the years, with a more recent bump in max internal storage up to a whopping 8 terabytes, which is insane. If you've managed to fill up 8 terabytes of gaming storage for your PS5, please leave a comment below. I just want to meet you. Not to mention that similar to the PS4, it does also support external hard drives also. I personally have upgraded to both, and I'm happy to report the process is very simple, and it's also a real win for Sony to not go the proprietary route in this case, like they did with the Vita, or like Microsoft are currently doing with the Xbox Series. I can't stress that enough. Like this, what might seem like a little factor to the uninitiated makes a huge difference to the options available and affordability in terms of upgrading storage. And if you don't believe me, just look at the difference in price for a 1 terabyte PS5 internal storage, compare it to the Xbox equivalent. Okay, that was a lot to cover. We can now move on to software and UI. Deep breath. Now, just like the PS4, the operating system did release with some key features missing, notably the folders ability and themes. If you go through Reddit threads over the past 3 years for PS5, these are the two that commonly pop up most requested. Well, fortunately, we now have the folders ability, although it is a little lackluster compared to the features last gen. Earlier in this video, I mentioned how the system's button assignment options reminded me of the Switch, and again with the folders, it is very similar in that they're hidden away from the main system, the main menu system, tucked off into the side. I'm glad we finally got the feature back, but when you have an extensive library like myself, it really, makes a difference. Just a shame it's took around 2 years first of all for it to arrive, and then also it's not accessible from the main screen. Another similarity with the Switch is how PlayStation are handling their virtual console retro gaming functionality, embedding it with their PS Plus service, even implementing a similar rewind and save load slot features. There really seems to be some sort of parity here between these systems, which is interesting. It's a good thing. I'm fairly happy with how Nintendo have handled the Switch. In terms of themes, I ain't gonna lie, I personally loved themes on the PS4 and the PS3. I'm ashamed to say I'm one of those losers that spent quite a bit of money on them. But it's cool. I love stuff like that. I've got loads of themes on my phone. I like the idea of being able to change the entire feel of the system based on your mood or the seasons. Yeah, okay, that's sad, I know. All of this, unfortunately, is now gone. The design language, in general, just doesn't really accommodate for themes. So honestly, I'd be really surprised if it's ever coming back. Whenever the design language for the PS5 does accommodate for themes, there is a fair amount of static images used, which makes me wonder, hazard a guess, maybe these were actual still images from a dynamic theme that was probably experimented with during early builds of the OS. The lack of themes, though, may also be a memory aid and a stability choice, especially dynamic themes. We'll talk about that again in a sec when we talk about Quick Resume. The biggest drawback from the PlayStation OS, however, is the music and sound. What once were the kings of boot-up music and UI sounds, another step back after the also disappointing PS4 soundscape. But at least with that example, we could change the themes. Here, we can only turn it off. What is nice is the recent addition of haptic feedback, which is a nice replacement for the UI sounds. It actually works really well with the DualSense, feeling very similar to an experience you might get navigating a phone's UI. So I personally turn off the sounds, just have the haptics with the background music, and it works fairly well. If we don't get themes, it would at least be nice to be able to have a choice between different music and sounds. This video of a PS2 sounds implemented within a PS5 UI is proof of how cool a combo that is. Seriously though, I do love the PS2. I don't know if that's coming across yet. If we look at the Switch again, why don't we just get a color replacement for the background images that, like how they have a difference between a white theme and a black theme, something like that also could be quite nice. Maybe colored themes to match the faceplates. So one thing I've heard someone from an IGN podcast mention, amongst other people, although bear with me, I can't remember specifically who, I believe it was from the GameScoop podcast. But yeah, one of them was saying about how key features missing from PS5, one of them being the quick resume function from Xbox. Whilst I can see the appeal of this function, to reference the guys over at Digital Foundry, that ability isn't made from magic. The memory bandwidth in order to achieve that function comes from somewhere, and I'm personally glad that actually all of that power is being put into the games and the software stability. And boy, is it stable. It is a stable piece of kit. I also assume not having the themes probably adds to this, and it shows. I think my console has only crashed once since purchase compared to the PS4, which had a fair few amount of crashes, especially with all the bloody themes I had on it. Now this one is random, but why does it feel like the 6-axis keyboard is being phased out? I love the 6-axis keyboard. It's my favorite way of typing on the PlayStation, as it was on the PS4. But now it only seems accessible on certain screens, which is disappointing. Make it universal. It's the fastest way to type with a controller without using your voice. Overall, though, if I had to sum up, I would say the software and UI on the PS5 is fairly decent. There are a lot of pros. I really like how the media and games panels are separate this time around. That's awesome. I used my PS5 as a media hub as I did with my PS4. I just find it a much better experience having to select a folder like compared to the PS4 where it was a folder for media. This time around we got the tabs. That's just a lot simpler. Has to be said though, the PS5 again is another step back in terms of media playback. If you compare it to the absolute raw native media powerhouse that was the PS3, I don't think we'll ever fully come back to that or even understand why the PS3 had a SDHC port, but you know, life's mysteries. But yeah, the actual media player is fairly basic. On the PS5 there is some larger format support, which is nice, but there's no bookmark support this time around, so it doesn't remember where you are on the video. It's also actually separate from the media panel, which makes me think Sony only see you using this for game captures, which I kind of understand, considering the popularity of streaming services. But if you're like me, it does kind of suck if you still watch media files on a USB stick. We also had something leave the OS, which isn't too common. Here it was the Accolade system, which is a user review system where some games like Returnal and Sackboy actually had it integrated into the actual game UI. There would be game notifications to give the player you are co-oping with feedback, which I personally thought was really cool. The whole idea of having a user review system for online play, I think is generally a good idea. I could see there being issues with it being manipulated and abused, but does kind of feel like Sony gave up on this one fairly quickly. Onto the card system, another new feature since launch. It's still here, which is good. The main positive I'd say about this thing is the activity trophy tracking and the game help function. I particularly love the game help function. But again, as other innovative features can be left by the wayside, this is another one. It's only really supported for a few games, again, mostly being first-party ones, which is a shame because integrating video tips synced up to the gameplay, knowing where you are, precisely what tips you'll need, that's like really cool, man. I love that. Like, so many people these days rely on YouTube to look up guides or tips and hints, and having it integrated into the actual system UI, synced up to the gameplay is, again, just phenomenal. So I would love to see it further implemented. I could see how it's, you know, a time constraint for Sony as well as, you know, not necessarily a cost-effective program to implement. But I do think there's possibly some solutions for the future, especially in terms of enticing third parties to become more involved. You know, like for instance, maybe they should just have it auto-load relevant YouTube videos instead of Sony going out of their way to make the system themselves. You know, just making it easier, or maybe even implementing the ability to pin apps easier or have picture-in-picture with YouTube, something like that. Because as it stands, Sony are making these videos and tips themselves right now, and that's why only a handful of select titles have it. Speaking of picture-in-picture, it's great that it's utilized for share screen and game sharing, but that was a feature that existed on the PS4, so we won't talk too much about that. But just want to say as a PSA again, you can share a game with someone if they don't have that title through streaming it. Most people don't realize this. It's a real feature on the PS5 and the PS4. Look it up. Thank me later. So yeah, it's still one of my favorite new features of the PS5 generation, even if it is underutilized. Also picture-in-picture, which we've talked about. It would also be great if picture-in-picture supported apps like YouTube, Twitch, maybe even Netflix. That would be pretty cool. Onto the PlayStation app, which has seen an upgrade this generation. It is missing the community section, but that was something that we also lost during the PS4. Sorely missed. Rumors we're going to be getting Discord further integrated into the PS5 system. That would be nice. We did have the fairly large addition of the Stars program onto the PS app, something I am completely addicted to. Like literally I'm downloading trials and starting them up just so I can get certain 3D models. Help me, it doesn't make sense. As many have mentioned, it would be great if this was integrated into the actual console system UI. I'm 100% certain it's on the way. I truly believe it is. Overall, it's a great reward system. I have almost accumulated £20 worth of store credit. That's mostly just from starting up games, so can't really complain there. It's a great step forward for the PSN store. Okay, now on to the next section, the PlayStation Plus service, which has seen the biggest change this generation with the PS5 lifespan, mostly as a reaction to the Game Pass service, it would seem, despite the fact that PlayStation were technically the first to offer a games-based subscription service. It's now been separated into 3 tiers, folding PS Now into it, which is a very good thing. PS Now, even though I was a fan, as a standalone, it was not really showing any signs of growth. Overall, the service has seen mixed feedback, as you might expect, really, with a service overhaul like this one. I have to say, the names suck. What is with these bad name choices, Sony? Please stop. Why not call it Silver, Gold, and Platinum? I mean, I think that would be a good choice. Sony does have a bad rep for poor name choices, and this is definitely one of them. The real positive takeaway from the new tiers is that the extra tier really has gone on to be quite a bargain in terms of what's on offer, with a huge selection of rotating games on offer, including many first-party heavy hitters such as Forbidden West within a year of release. This really is the Game Pass competitor part of the service, albeit without the PC support. We've even on some cases had some day one releases, such as with the amazing Stray, which honestly, as far as indie games go, this is generally one of the best games out there in recent times. The negative takeaway being the premium tier, which has had a slow drip feed of retro titles since launch, as well as a large number of filler titles no one really cares about. There just doesn't seem to be much in the way of value here, of any real proposition for what you're paying for, especially with the recent eye-watering £120 a year price increase, which is a lot of money for any sub-service. I think that would work better possibly as a monthly charge, you know, £10 a month, but annoyingly the monthly charge for it is actually £13. Thankfully, there's been some expansion recently with the addition of the movie package Sony Pictures Core. You know what I'm going to say about the name. Let me decide these things. Why don't we just call it the Movie Pass or Sony Pictures app? But yeah, why don't we get something similar with Crunchyroll, Funimation, which are both owned by Sony. By the way, nobody's going to use this app outside of people from PS Plus. Just want to be clear there. It would be nice if we got some Sony TV shows in here, even some that were just licensed out. Could you imagine how cool it would be if we had The Last of Us on there or Twisted Metal? I know it's probably a tough call considering the licensing agreements, but Sony TV have their hands on a lot of pies. We got Breaking Bad, Community, The Crown, Cobra Kai, The Boys, and of course The Last of Us and Twisted Metal. All of these shows were either made or co-produced by Sony. There's definitely an argument for a Sony streaming service when you take that into consideration. It's not just Spider-Man films they make. The addition of PS5 streaming will also add another possible audience to their tier. It really would be nice to see more with this tier. It could definitely open up the audience range with the PS5 streaming, especially once they get that integrated into the portal, hopefully. Here's hoping for the rumored PC launcher and some sort of PS-PC cross-membership. Now that the PlayStation titles have grown on PC, honestly, some sort of Steam partnership would be amazing. I know Valve don't want to touch subscription services, and I'm happy for that, but if it was a PlayStation sub that allowed you access to those games on a Steam account, I'll tell you, that would sell some subs. But yeah, essentially they got a lot of work cut out for them. Again, it's amazing to see them even going back to retro titles like this, relaunching PS1 games, etc. In some cases with trophies as well. This is the biggest move in that direction since the early PS3 days. And it's great, they're even attempting it from a video games conservation angle. Even though we still don't have any Wipeout games or Dino Crisis, it's cool. Please don't stop. Now we're getting there, just 2 more sections to go. On to business practices and communication. Recently in this regards, we've had pretty big news in the way President Jim Ryan announcing his retirement to the appeasement of many. Maybe now the online petition can be taken down, thankfully. It's undeniable that there have been a lot of resistance to business decisions made during the PS5 lifespan, and even a bit earlier beyond that. Although overall, mostly this gen, we've got the PS Plus pricing increase, the lack of communication, which I'll focus on in a bit, the price increase of games to £70, which is universal amongst other platforms, so kind of helps with that one a little bit. Most of these kind of dumb, these complaints, but noisy minority will always outpace quiet majority. If we go back to other complaints, we got the "We believe in generations" comment and keeping things on PS4. For the record, if it was the other way round, people would probably just complain that they're ditching the PS4 too soon. I believe this was actually a complaint with the PS4 leaving the PS3 behind. You literally can't really win with this argument, I think. Moving on, we also have his comment about Gran Turismo 1, which I will say that wasn't great. I'll agree with that one. We also have the aggressive push towards live service games, which we'll come back to later. The closure of Vita and PS3 stores, which thankfully was reversed, and the list goes on. Honestly, we'll probably never know how much Jim would have had a hand in these decisions. He'd probably assume that, there's a number of board members at Sony that would also have a lot of power, stock members also. Regardless, he's going, and even though some of these complaints are dumb, I do think it's good we're getting a shake-up. Unless the company is 100% perfect, which Sony definitely is not, you should always shake it up. For me though, I would say the negatives I could list. Personally, I would say maybe the pricing of the PSVR 2, just the PSVR 2 in general. Seriously, watch my video. That thing is DOA. In terms of general business decisions, there have been price increases across the board, most of which have honestly been quite minimal. The game price increase was long overdue, so I'd say that's a fairly non-issue. The console price increase was fairly minimal. Sony did state it was due to rising costs, which is something that's been reported about across the news in various business sectors. So I could see that making sense. But I should state, literally as I have been writing this, you can currently get a PS5 with Spider-Man 2 from Argos for £400. So that's quite a drop from the original price. So you can definitely get it cheaper than the RRP. We also live in a world where the Nintendo Switch is almost 7 years old and has officially never got a price drop. So again, this is a universal trend. Also, don't forget the PS5 and Xbox Series are also, just generally speaking, bargains. These companies sell their consoles at a loss for most of their life cycle. They're worth considerably more to build at launch, considering what they have on offer. So yeah, some of these are fairly small issues. In my opinion, my biggest complaint is that I just don't think Jim Ryan is a very good communicator. He's just not very personable. I'm sure he's great behind the scenes. That's why he got his job. The guy has been at PlayStation for almost 30 years, which is incredible, and it's nice to see somebody at a company that long being rewarded and promoted. Let's not forget the PS5 is a very successful console so far, which we'll go into later. It couldn't have been easy for anyone also launching a console during the pandemic, but here we are, and it's outpacing the PS4 currently in the same time span. Meanwhile, the Series X, which released around the same time, is actually selling considerably less than the Xbox One, and everybody loves Phil Spencer, don't they? So I really feel like we need somebody that's a good talker, at least if not making the business decisions, just a front man making, or doing all the publicity. Fan favorite Shuhei Yoshida would be perfect for this, but he's already been president of SIE, plus he's an older gentleman, so he might already be considering retirement soon. Hiroki Totoki, who is the interim, and he could be a front runner for the new position. Also, going back to Jim, we probably would not have had this 10-year Call of Duty deal without him. He really was the one that was sticking his neck out there, making a big fuss over the acquisition, and it worked. The deal did not exist when Microsoft announced the acquisition, unlike, for instance, if you compare it to the Bungie deal, where day one there was the announcement that games would remain third party. We didn't get that with the Microsoft deal. In fact, all we got was that the games would be coming to Game Pass day one. So you can kind of thank Jim for locking in that deal for 10 years. It was a ballsy move for any CEO. So I personally applaud them for that. And I'm not even a fan of Call of Duty, not anymore at least, anyway, in the past maybe. If we look into communication practices in general, most of it seemed to be through blog posts, data plays, and PlayStation showcases. Sony have long ditched the E3 spectacle, and instead we now have a steady communication with fans through blog posts. Big events like E3 are all but completely gone. This does mean, however, that there is a loss of grandeur and spectacle for publicity events from what should be larger announcements, such as with the PSVR 2 being revealed, or even the PS5 being launched. With the PSVR 2 being announced on a PlayStation blog seems kind of weird. That's supposed to be a new platform. It is what it is. If we look at the showcase and the state of plays, some of them are made really well. From their perspective, I do get it. It must save them a ton of money not doing these big events. Marketing budgets are universally bloated. These companies have historically thrown millions against the wall, hoping to see what sticks, and that money could probably be best spent elsewhere, like sick advertising campaigns, such as the recent TV ads they've done, and Sony have done a fair bunch. The Feel It Now advertising campaign is pretty sick, but hats have to go off for the Live from PS5 ad, especially how they went on to actually recreate these scenes around the world as part of a larger advertising campaign. One thing the boys at Sony Marketing can do is make a great live action TV ad, and it's something they're still doing today, 30 years on from the landmark PS1 ads of old. I just wish we could ban CGI gaming trailers in general. It should always be in-game engine advertising, always. That's just my personal opinion. I feel like a lot of people would agree, but it's also an industry-wide problem. State of Plays, Sony's lead video announcements and trailer show, again similar to Nintendo's choice of PR. Reactions for these can be very hit or miss. Ultimately, it's going to be down to what you want to see individually, but generally the production of these are fairly tight. I have to say shout out to these transitions on the last showcase. Again, would make a sick PlayStation theme, just saying. Also, I don't know how, but Sony needs to figure out a way of stopping leaks. Leaks have been...
Well, we're so excited.
Maybe it's already on Twitter by now.
a lot. I'm thinking of trained assassin every QA office. I don't know. Anyway, we've made it to the last section, and the most important one probably is the games. PlayStation, just like Nintendo, would be nothing without their games, and their PS5 Gen has thus far been a great one, with an incredibly strong start, which honestly is fairly unlike them. And let's not forget the one studio that's really come out swinging, Insomniac, which in many ways has become the Naughty Dog of this generation. Just recently, we've had Spider-Man 2 become the fastest selling Sony game ever, with 2.5 million in its first day. We've also had probably one of the most underrated games of all time, Horizon Forbidden West. I'm happy to say that. For that game to be open world and achieve what it did achieve in a world of cyberpunks and Jedi survivors is an achievement. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is honestly like playing a Pixar film at points. Shout out to Kenneth for similar reasons and capturing that PS2 vibe perfectly. The gorgeous Demon's Souls remake, Sony keeping close to From Software, which is what I like to see. We do need that Bloodborne sequel though, fingers crossed that's on the tip of being announced. The phenomenal bullet hell game Returnal by very reliable Housemarque Studio, which has now been bought out by Sony and part of the PlayStation family. The chaotic and beautiful Final Fantasy XVI, the sweeping epic God of War Ragnarok, which is actually the only game in recent memory to make me cry. Sackboy, which is honestly a hidden gem, one of my favourite pick up and play games. And let's not forget Gran Turismo 7, Polyphony back again, showing why they're the kings of racing sims. And as mentioned, Stray, probably my favourite indie game in recent memory. And of course, let's not forget Astrobot, phenomenal. What can I say that has not been said about this game? I loved the VR rescue mission, and this iteration is another step forward. Can't wait to see more from this team. Man, I would love an Astrobot game each time there's a new console iteration, or even like, I don't know, man, like a free annual DLC. Could you imagine? Something like that would be incredible. I don't know if we're going to get it, but I guess we've missed it with the Slim, but maybe we'll have Pro. Then on top of that are a bunch of director's cuts and remakes, which I am also personally quite happy to see. Really a huge output compared to other gens, and the thing here is there's still more to come. We've got Wolverine on the horizon, unknown Naughty Dog new IP, which It's been rumored for a while now. Possible new Uncharted game, because that's definitely what this trailer means, 100%. It's not just a generic Tomb Raider video game. It's definitely a new Uncharted game. This is an example of every games media person. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which personally I think would have been cool if they just called it Final Fantasy VII Disc 2 for nostalgia's sake. Death Stranding 2, I was actually one of those weirdos that loved the first game. Marathon looks cool. Pacific Drive, I see you. Silent Hill 2 remake, thank the Lord. Phantom Blade Zero also looks pretty sweet. And I assume there's going to be a Last of Us Part 3 right at the end of this console's lifespan, as per tradition. And of course, there's the bevy of live service games, namely 12 that were initially announced in the works. Fortunately, there has been a recent statement by Hiroki Totoki that these games are being reviewed before continuing production, which is great news, and that there'll only be 6 now scheduled for release by financial year 2025. 3 would have been a lot. We really don't need 12 or even 6. It's a stretch still. We have had these depressing Horizon Fortnite style art leaks, which I hope isn't happening.
So there's since been a cancellation of a number of initially announced live service games by Sony, and some not officially announced, such as Spider-Man, The Great Web. There's also rumors that a rumored Twisted Metal live service game has been cancelled. So we're definitely seeing a step back from the initial announcement of live service games.
But it got me thinking, you know what would be really cool? Imagine a Battle Royale Destruction Derby, 100 cars in a pit arena. Bring it, please. You can take that idea, just make the game, make it happen. If we look at like Sega and how they cancelled Hyenas, that game had playable demos and a full feature in Edge magazine. Honestly, whoever made that decision at Sega deserves a promotion. Generally, it must have taken so many yes men to get it as far as it did. And I get it, it makes sense. Sony have nailed a level of quality and reputation within narrative-driven linear games, which is why we've seen more open world stuff in recent times. They're branching out, and that's what this is. They want a multiplayer game, which is great, but honestly, one successful live service game would be enough, and also more realistic. So hearing 12 in production sounds insane. There's very little chance that any of these projects will hit that same high as your Fortnites, Warzones, PUBGs, or even Rocket Leagues. Like, these games are where they are because they were some of the first, and that novelty will wear out in time, believe it or not. I think there's an expectation that certain games will be around forever, kind of like your Maddens and FIFA. I would argue no, sports games are directly linked to an interest in that sport externally, so that doesn't exactly mean the same thing for COD or Minecraft or Warzone or, whatever. Although this is all guesswork, that's what all of this is. We already know so much about these announced games. The fantasy-based live service game from London Studios, for example, I have zero interest in this, but for all we know, it could be the next Fortnite, and that's the thing here. These are all shots in the dark, even for PlayStation. But to me, something like Wolverine, given the IP, the general idea of where it might go based on, Insomniac's pedigree, I feel a lot more confident with that than any of these projects, such as Fair Games, etc. Okay, so let's wrap it up. My camera is literally about to die. We're finally at the conclusion. As of time of writing, Sony has last reported 46.5 million PS5 consoles in the wild. So this is as of November 2023, which is great for 3 years. So for reference, this is on par with the PS4. Previously, they were behind by only 1 million consoles, but in any case, the past second quarter, where PlayStation sold 4.9 million PS5 units, was actually the highest for that quarter by any PlayStation console ever, including the PS2. And also a 25% increase over the PS4 within the same equivalent period, which is insane and really a key signifier that this console will have a strong third and fourth financial year. Like, the PS2 sales numbers are insane. I'm not sure if we'll ever catch up to that with the PS5, but things generally are looking pretty good. I think technically the PS2 reached 40 million consoles in its second year, not its third, so the PS5 would have a lot of work to keep growing substantially to make up for it. Another metric to look at would be the chart provided by Aspire Analysts, which shows a comparison to the PS4 on the equivalent launch timescale. Please note that this does show that the PS4 is overlapping the PS5. However, this is during the COVID-19 period, as well as a chip shortage caused by that. The fact that the PS5 can keep up with it at all is impressive, only being behind sales by around 1 million units. It should also be noted that during the launch period, Sony has noted that users have spent an 81% increase in playtime on the new console compared to the PS4 during the same timescale. Which really makes you aware that something special is happening here. A lot of that could be contributed to the backwards compatibility of the PS5. However, 80% is still a massive jump. Another statistic that proves this is the 11% increase in PS5 game sales over PS4 game sales during both respective launch periods. I was also recently listening to Sacred Symbols podcast where they corroborated this with a recent PS5 game sales report that had it currently at 9% increase in comparison to the PS4. So the PS5 ain't slowing down anytime soon. In short, this is a very much successful console, and as things stand, and again, it really seems like things started off well for the PS5, and now they're just starting to go beyond well into PS2 territory of record breaking. Which is great news. I would say that it's thanks mostly to the steady output of great games that are making this generation for Sony, but honestly it's also clear that after 30 years of being in this space and being rightly successful in it, they have laid significant foundation work for Sony, and the fan base is simply stronger than ever. So it'll be interesting to see what the next 3 years hold for PlayStation. By then I'm sure we'll know the answer to whether or not live service games worked. We'll probably also have a better idea if the PSVR 2 is as dead as I'm saying on this video, which you should definitely watch. I'm assuming in 3 years from now we'll either have our hands on a PS6 or at least know what it looks like or when it's coming out. As I've mentioned at the start of the video, I think the fact the Pro is going to be released next year means that it could actually be longer than a 6-year cycle. Plus, if you take into account the general slow startup on getting these consoles out to consumers due to the console shortage. Hopefully, if I'm still around, I'll be doing a follow-up video in 3 years' time, and if I do, I'll be sure to watch this one back and reference it. Thanks so much for watching. That is it. I generally need to end the video before the camera stops working. Till next time, my name is Mark. This has been the Magic Beanbag, and this has been a mid-gen review of the PS5.